This is part 86 of jQuery tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to build a jQuery menu using data from a database table. So here is what we want to achieve. Using this data from this database table, we want to build this menu. So if you look at the table here, we've got 4 columns. The first column is ID. The second column is the menu text. So this is the text that will appear on our menu. And if you look at this parent ID column, this is very important. This is what is establishing the relationship between these menu items. If you look at the first 4 items here, they are the country names: USA, India, UK, Australia. So they are the root items within the menu. And notice the parent ID column for those 4 rows is null, meaning they're the top items, they don't have a parent above them. And if you look at the next 2 rows, Virginia and Maryland, their parent ID is 1, and this column references ID column in the same table. So the menu item with ID 1 is USA. So these 2 rows, that is Virginia and Maryland, are children of country USA. And if you look at the next 3 rows, AP, MP, Karnataka, they are the children for row with ID 2. Row with ID 2 is India. So AP, MP, and Karnataka, they are the states in country India. And if you look at the last 3 rows, their parent ID is 9. And if you look at 9, that is Karnataka. So these 3 last rows are cities within Karnataka state. Okay, so notice the menu here. We've got the first 4 countries: USA, India, UK, Australia. Those are the root items. Within India, it has got its children, AP, MP, and Karnataka, the 3 states within India. And Karnataka has got 3 children, the 3 cities within Karnataka: Bangalore, Mangalore, and Mysore. So that's the significance of parent ID column. It establishes the relationship between these menu items. And the last column, active, this is going to determine whether if you want the menu item to be enabled or not. So this active column is 1 for all the rows except Mysore. So all the menu items will be enabled except Mysore. So if you look at Mysore, notice that it is grayed out. So it is disabled. So if you want any of the menu item to be disabled, simply set that to 0. Alright, so let's see how to build this. Let's flip to SQL Server Management Studio. So the first step here is to create the table itself. So here is the table, create table script, and here is the insert script. I've already executed the script. And the next step is to create a stored procedure. So here I have a very simple stored procedure, sp get menu data, and all the stored procedure is doing is selecting all the rows and columns from this table tbl menu. Alright, now let's flip to Visual Studio. Here I have an ASP.NET Web Application project. Within the web.config file, I have included a connection string to my database. Now let's go ahead and add a class file to our project, and let's call this Menu.cs. So the properties within this class are going to correspond to the columns in this table, that is ID, menu, text, parent ID, and active. So let's go ahead and create those properties. So I'm going to create an integer property, ID, and this is going to be an auto implemented property. And let's call this parent ID. Now, if you look at parent ID column, parent ID can be null. So I'm going to make the data type here nullable integer. And we want a string property, and the name of the property is going to be MenuText. So this property corresponds to this MenuText column. And the last property that we want is active. So I'm going to create a Boolean property because the corresponding column in the DB is a bit column. So it can either store true or false. So Boolean, and let's call this property active. And I'm going to add one more property, and this is going to be of type list of menu, the same class. So why do we need this property? Let's call the property list. So this property is going to store the children of a given menu item. So For example, if you look at country USA, it has children, 2 children, Virginia and Maryland, the 2 states that belong to USA. So to store that parent-child relationship, I am using this list property here. So if the country is USA, then its children is going to be Virginia and Maryland, stored in this property, list property. Alright, so that is our object. Now let's go ahead and add a generic handler. And let's call this, let's select web and then generic handler, and let's call this MenuHandler. So here we are going to write ADO.NET code to retrieve the database data. So let's bring in the required ADO.NET namespaces. So we need System.Data, we need System.Configuration, and we also need System.Data.SqlClient. So within our ProcessRequest function, I'm going to write some ADO.NET code. In the interest of time, I have already typed the required ADO.NET code. So let's copy that and paste it right here. So what are we doing? We're reading the connection string from web.config file, and then here we are creating a list of menu object, and we are creating an instance of SQL connection object using this connection string that we have read from the web.config file. Next, we are creating a SQL command object. Using this command object, we want to execute this stored procedure sp get menu data. And since that is a stored procedure, we have to tell that to the command object. We are opening the connection, we are executing the command. And while we are looping through each row within the reader, we want to retrieve ID, MenuText, ParentId, active, and then add that menu object to the list. And all these properties are straightforward except for this ParentId. Now notice ParentId can be null. So that's why we are checking here, within the reader, do we have a db null value? If that's the case, then we want to store null in that property. Else, if it is not equal to db null.value, then we want to convert that to an integer and store that against this property in the menu object. Finally, we are adding that menu object to this list that we have created here on the top. Okay, now, so that's straightforward ADO.NET code. So this process request function is going to retrieve the menu data from the database table. Now what I'm going to do is write another private function here. So let's call this, so basically this is going to return us list of menu object, and let's call this get menu tree. So what is this function going to do? It's going to build us a hierarchical menu tree and return that for us. And we're going to pass 2 parameters to this function, list of menu, and let's call this list, and a nullable integer, the parent ID. Keep in mind parent ID can be null, so I made it nullable integer. Okay, so what are we going to do here? So we are going to pass the list of menu items, basically whatever we have retrieved within this process request function from the database. We're going to pass that list to this function, and this function has to build us a hierarchical menu tree for us. For the moment, if you look at the data that we have right here, we have hierarchy here, but we don't have that parent-child relationship in an object-oriented fashion. So what I'm going to do here is write some code to give us, okay, the parent item is USA and all its children are these. The list property should have all of them. Okay, so we want to build such kind of an hierarchical tree. So if you look at, for example, India has got 3 children, and out of these 3 children, one of the child has got 3 more children. So we want that entire hierarchical tree to be built so we can easily construct the menu from that object. Okay, so and that is what is this function going to do. So I'm going to return list dot, so I'm going to write some link code here. So list dot where x such that x.ParentId equals whatever parent ID we pass to the function. And we want to select all such rows. Now what I want to do is project a new object x such that new menu object, and whatever we are going to project, we want to convert that to a list and return that, because the return type of a function is list of menu. Okay, so here we're going to construct this menu object, and if you look at the menu object which we have created here, it has got all these properties. So let's go ahead and initialize those properties. So we want to initialize ID property, so ID equals x.id, so whatever we get back, and MenuText equals x.MenuText, parent ID equals x.ParentId, active equals x.active, and the most important thing is the list property. So what should this list contain? It should contain its own children. So to get its own children, what I'm going to do is call the same function recursively. So list equals, remember what is the data type of this list property? It's list of menu. And if you look at this function getMenuTree, what is it returning? It's returning list of menu. So I am going to call the same function recursively. So list equals getMenuTree, and the parameters that you pass to this function are important. So what are the parameters that we need to pass? We need to pass the menu list and the parent ID. So the list is going to be the same, but parent ID is going to be x.id. So this ID right here. Okay, so let's see how we are going to use this function. Probably that will make it a bit clear. So within our ProcessRequest function, we have already built a list of menu items, and here let's go ahead and create another variable. Let's call this list of menu, and let's call this variable MenuTree equals, I'm going to call this function getMenuTree, and to this function I'm going to pass this list that we got from the DB, and the parent ID I'm going to pass null. Remember, some of the rows, I mean the top level items within the menu, the parent ID is null. So we are passing null to this getMenuTree function. So first time when this function is called, we are passing the list that we got from the DB, and the parent ID is null. So what is this expression going to do? It's going to retrieve all those items, all those rows or objects that have parent ID null. Okay, and then it's going to build a list out of that, and for each parent that we get back, it's building their child items by calling this getMenuTree function recursively. So this is going to give us a hierarchical menu tree. Alright, so all that is left now is to convert that or serialize that to JSON. So let's go ahead and use the JavaScript serializer class. This class is present in a different namespace, System.Web.Script.Serialization namespace. So let's create an instance of JavaScript serializer class. Let's call it JS equals new JavaScript serializer, js.serialize, and we're going to pass this menu tree object, and this function will serialize that to JSON format. And what do we want to do with that JSON string? Let's go ahead and write it to the response stream using this context object. So context.response.write whatever we get. Alright, so let's go ahead and save the changes. Let's go ahead and build this and see what we actually get from the DB. So let's navigate to MenuHandler.ashx. So look at what we are getting from the DB. So we have ID1, menu text is USA, parent ID for USA is null, right? And active, it's true. And look at the list property. This is the most important thing. So this list property now contains two objects. The first object is Virginia and the second object is Maryland. For example, if you look at Virginia, look at that, ID is 5, menu text is Virginia, parent ID is 1. So the item with ID 1 is USA, and it's active, true. And look at the list, that is an empty because Virginia does not have its own children. Okay, so we've got a hierarchical menu tree here. Now all that is left is to write the required jQuery code and use the jQuery UI menu function. So here we have a web form, and within the web form I have a div element and I have an unordered list element, and I have set the ID of the unordered list to menu. You can give it any meaningful ID you want, so I just called it menu. Now what we want to do is build an HTML structure with parent-child relationship. That's what the menu widget in jQuery expects. So on that unordered list, if we call the jQuery UI menu function, it's going to build us this menu for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So here within our ready function, I'm going to write a function, a JavaScript function. Let's call this build menu. Now to this function, I'm going to pass two parameters. We're going to pass the parent HTML element, so I'm going to call it parent, and the menu items, the entire hierarchical menu tree, the JSON object that we get from the database. Okay, so this is a collection of items, so I'm going to use jQuery each function and loop through each item. So let's loop through the items, and as we are looping through, we want to call a function. So as we are looping through, I want to create a variable. Let's call it list item. So to this unordered list, we want to add list items. So list item equals li, and to that we want to append the menu text. I can use this keyword here. So as we are looping through each item, this refers to the item that we are currently looping through, and we know the object that is returned back is going to have this menu text property. So that's what we want to be, display in the menu. So this dot menu text, and we want to close the list item. Now another thing that I'm going to check is this list item that we are adding to the menu, whether we want that to be enabled or disabled. That's driven by this column active. In the object we have active property, so I'm going to check if not this dot active, right? If it's not active, then what we want to do, we want that list item to be disabled in the menu. And if we want the list item to be disabled, we need to add a class to that list item. So I'm going to use this li.add class. So let's actually wrap this using a jQuery wrapper. So we get jQuery IntelliSense. So li.add class, and the class that we want to add is UI-state-disable. So jQuery UI is going to make that menu item disabled if that class is applied. Okay, now we want to append that list item to the parent that we are going to pass into this function. So I'm going to say li.append to unordered, the parent that we are going to pass to this function. Alright, so now I'm going to check the child items. Okay, so as we are looping through each item, remember the items can have children. So for USA, for example, it has 2 children, and whether the menu item has children or not, how can we detect that? Using the list property that we have in this object, right? So I'm going to check here if this dot list, if that is not undefined, and this dot list dot length greater than 0, then we know that we've got child items. So what do we want to do at that point? We want to create an unordered list, because if you have child items, that should be the sub menu. So I'm going to create an unordered list. So $unordered list, and let's close the unordered list. Okay. Now we want to append this unordered list to the list item, because that is going to be the sub menu. So li.append to unordered list.append to, because we want to append this unordered list to the list item. So unordered list dot append to the parent list item. Okay. And then I'm going to recursively call this build menu function again. Okay, because we want to build the child items. And again, this build menu function, it expects two parameters, the parent. So the parent element here now is going to be the list item. That is going to the parent, and list is going to be this dot list. Okay, so a very simple recursive jQuery function which is going to build the HTML structure with that parent-child relationship for us. Now let's go ahead and issue a jQuery Ajax request. So $.Ajax, let's go ahead and build our options. So the URL that we want to call, so the URL is going to be MenuHandler.ashx. So let's copy that and specify it right here. And we want to issue a GET request, and if the request completes successfully, we want to call a function, and the data type that we are expecting back from the server is JSON. So this function is going to receive the data from the server. What do we want to do now? We want to call this build menu function. So I'm going to call build menu, and to this function we need to pass the parent element. The parent element is this unordered list element with ID menu. So $menu, that is going to be our parent item, and the items we are going to have in this parameter. Okay, so that's the data that we receive from the server. Okay, so all that is left now is to call jQuery UI menu function. So this is going to build us that hierarchical structure, and on that we're going to call the jQuery UI menu function. Okay, so let's save all these changes. Let's go ahead and run the page. And look at that. We get it, but I think there is some issue. So let us see what is that. Now look at that, it's not building quite the way we want it to be. So let's see what we are doing here. So basically here the parent is going to be unordered list, not the list item. So that's what is the mistake. So let's save our changes and run this one more time, and look at this, we get what we expect. And if we look at USA, we have its children, India, we have its children, and if you look at Karnataka, notice that Bangalore and Mangalore enabled, but Mysore is disabled because we have set that to 0. So here is the menu handler code that we have seen, and here is the get menu tree recursive function which builds us that hierarchical structure, and here is the HTML and jQuery code. Thank you for listening and have a great day.